more than anything else, this win locks you into the NCAA tournament. Now, we talked about it going in, based on Lay's projections and all the kind of stuff, the RPI and the history of teams in the top 30 in the RPI with the record South Carolina had. You felt like you were probably in, but you wanted at least one win in Hoover to safely be able to say, okay, South Carolina is going to be playing more baseball with the NCAA tournament coming up next week. And I think we can safely say that now. Now, where they go from here is going to be interesting, because if you could find a way to beat an Arkansas team, put together maybe another win or two over the course of the next couple of days, you might have the opportunity to improve your seeding a little bit. They were obviously projected as a 3 seed in Clemson's regional going into the weekend. You have an opportunity to maybe do yourself a little bit better if you can win a couple more games. But again, at the end of the day, you won one yesterday. You ended your near historic losing streak, and now whatever happens past this is gravy and just adds on to what your resume is as of right now. So good thing. Again, you got the stink off your team in a way, and now move forward in the SEC tournament. Story of yesterday, obviously Chris freaking Veach, 5 2/3 innings. Three hits, 3 hits there, 0 runs, 0 walks, and 6 strikeouts. Just dude absolutely dealing on the mound. And we talked about this, going in, that Carolina had to do whatever they had to do from a pitching standpoint to make sure that they won at least one game. And Coach Kingston said, hey, we got all options on the table for this game, which even meant, Garrett Gainey, who had just thrown a couple days before, nearly 100 pitches, would have theoretically been available in a closing situation if need be. And we wondered, okay, are you going to stick to that plan of what you did on Saturday, where you have everybody work basically one time through the order, give you 2 innings, and then move on to the next guy and the next guy and the next guy? Or are you going to feel it out? And it ended up being the latter, where Veach is just cooking, right? And now they're worse. Allowed some guys to get on base in the last couple of innings there, and there was some weariness, especially in that 9th inning, where Coach Williams comes out there and asks, talks to him on the mound, say, hey, where you at here? Can you close this thing out? And he's able to do that. But I tip my hat to Coach Kingston and Matt Williams for allowing him to continue on there and not being too quick on the trigger to pull him out, especially after what happened on Friday with, Garrett Gainey, who again, is best pitcher on staff, and you left him in there a little bit too long, ends up getting cooked, or ends up getting hit around a little bit by those last couple batters, gives up some extra runs, and then the bullpen comes in and lets you down. But they rolled with the hot hand. They let Veach go as long as he possibly could, and that ended up being the 5 2/3 to end that game. And there was no indication he was going to be able to do this. Now, Veach has been very, very solid this season, but when you look at his numbers on the year, most of his performances are in the 1 to 2 inning category. In fact, I believe he has not gone more than, he's not gone past 2 2/3 innings this entire year. The last time he did that was in non-conference against USC Upstate. Also did it earlier on in the season against Longwood as well. So this is a guy that had no indication that he was going to be able to go that deep into a game, especially pitching that well, based on what his performances have been this season. But that's kind of the weird thing about Hoover, is you'll have these kind of stories. You'll have these kind of guys that just pop kind of out of nowhere and put on great performances out there in Hoover. And that was certainly the case with, with Chris Veach yesterday. And again, you kind of had this all or nothing game plan. That, if things went according to plan, you were probably going to work through, maybe 4 or 5 pitchers over the course of the game, and things looked a little concerning I would say, when you go out there, you have Dylan Eskew, who can only get through an inning and a third, give up those 2 runs. Then Becker comes in and gives up 2 runs himself. Now, it was a little bit better of a performance than Eskew had, but it just kind of felt like this is going to be another one of those games where you're going to be giving up, 8, 9, 10 runs or something like that and hoping your offense can keep pace with it. But once Veach gets in there, settles things down, has great command, through strikes on 47 of 67 pitches, and just was able to work the game from there, which is absolutely fantastic. And above anything else, where now you're advancing in the tournament, you preserved more arms than you would have had to use yesterday. Again, if you had to use maybe 2 or so more guys to close out that game, if Veach was only able to come in for, maybe 2 innings or something like that, like you'd been doing up to that point. Well, where now you have more arms, some more fresher arms to be able to use. You're going to get Eli Jones starting today. But if you need to use, say, a Garrett Gainey or something like that, who, again, would have been available yesterday based on what Coach Kingston told us, if you need to use him in, to close things out in the final inning or 2, you can do that. And if you don't end up having Garrett Gainey, maybe you're using him in the, in the starting situation coming up tomorrow, whether that be in the elimination bracket or the winner's bracket. Because that's the thing about South Carolina. Now that you've won in the first round of the NCAA or the SEC tournament, you're guaranteeing yourself at least 2 more games. Where if South Carolina loses today, they'll have to play the early game tomorrow in the elimination round, and if they win today, that buys them at least 2 more games as they progress through the rest of the SEC tournament. So, good place to be for Carolina, for again, a team that looked very bleak for the past couple weeks and didn't give us a lot of hope and optimism. And what does this mean for them ultimately in the NCAA tournament? I don't know. Again, I think it locks them in more than anything else, and they have the opportunity to improve on their seeding. Does this suddenly mean that they're going to be a team that's going to go, play in a super regional and go to Omaha? No, and not in my opinion, because you still have these pitching issues. One performance does not save that, but it does give you some hope that maybe some of these things can continue to happen, and maybe you can put up a little bit more of a fight in the rest of the postseason, depending on how far you go. So, we'll see how the rest of the tournament goes, but for today at least, very good feeling knowing that you have at least gotten yourself back into the win category. And perhaps the highlight of the entire day, let's go with cut number 3 here, Dave. This happened yesterday in the 3rd inning.
Driven to right field. If it's fair, it's gone. It's gone. Grand slam. Dalton Reeves, 3rd home run of the inning for the Gamecocks into the Alabama bullpen, and South Carolina takes the lead for the first time today here in the 3rd.
Derek, I think that's our first Grand Slam of the year. Comes in the biggest ballpark all year.
And you are 100% right there, Coach Lake. That was the first Grand Slam of the year. Dalton Reeves in that 3rd inning there, scoring the final 4 of the 6 runs that South Carolina was able to put up there to give themselves the lead that they would end up holding on to for the rest of the game and route to that 10-5 win. And that is really significant because you've been listening to this station this entire baseball season. What have we been chasing? A Grand Slam for the Palmetto Citizens Grand Slam giveaway. It had not happened at all this season. The pot was up to $1,350 yesterday. I mean, we were almost getting to the limit of how far this thing was going to go. Finally saw it happen yesterday. Congratulations to Philip Madison, who ended up winning all that money. I know he was on the early game a little bit earlier on this morning, and I think he was walking into work as he was talking to the guy. So good on him for actually showing up for work today, because you get into a little bit of money, that can maybe make you want to call out sick that next day. But still continuing to work there. But congratulations to him, and thank you for everybody that has entered the contest and followed along as the season has gone along. And to believe me, when that Grand Slam finally happened, our collective group messages between all of us here at the station were absolutely blowing up, because we had been on this thing for the entire season, and obviously we were wondering if it was going to happen at all, because you have some teams like Georgia, they can go out there and hit 6-7 Grand Slams on the season, and South Carolina, not that they weren't getting in a lot of bases loaded situations, but were finally able to knock one over the wall at, again, one of the toughest parks to hit a grand slam in Hoover, where that ball's got to travel a long way as opposed to, somewhere like Tennessee where you played a week ago. And the funny thing is, so many times this season, because of this grand slam giveaway, anytime a Gamecock comes up with the bases loaded, I'm like on the edge of my seat, like, oh, maybe this is the time. Maybe this is where it's finally going to happen. When Reeves comes up with the bases loaded and 2 outs, that was actually the farthest thing from my mind. Isn't that weird? Like, I wasn't even thinking about him hitting a grand slam. I was like, all right, well, maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe he'll have a base knock and be able to knock in a run or something like that. Or, the worst case scenario of, you end up flying out or grounding out or striking out and ending the inning with, 3 ducks still left on the pond. But fortunately for all of us, he was indeed able to knock the ball over the fence there and be able to drive on all those runs and not only help the Gamecocks get a victory yesterday, much needed one, but also help our buddy Phillip be a little bit richer on this fine Wednesday morning. So congratulations to him, and thanks to everybody at Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union for allowing us to do this and follow this all season long, because it has been a fun chase that was well worth payoff when it finally did end up coming yesterday. So it's good to see there. We'll continue to talk about this. Jack Veltri with his daily check-in from Hoover, finally able to talk about a victory. We'll hit him coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday morning, getting you set for more South Carolina baseball in the SEC tournament coming up later today, all right here on The Game. It is a very busy weekend upcoming with the Memorial Day holiday and a very busy weekend with our friends over at Twin Peaks. All kicks off on Saturday with National Wine Day, May the 25th. The Lodge does not bunt when it comes to wine. If you're passionate about vino, ask Twin Peaks Girl for a bottle and glasses at each and every lodge. Sunday, got the Indy 500. You can put the pedal to the metal and drive down to Twin Peaks for the Indy 500. Start your engines with sauced and tossed wings and stay fueled for all 500 miles with those 29-degree draft beers and handcrafted cocktails. And then the weekend wraps up on Monday with Memorial Day, where Twin Peaks can be honoring all those that served. If you're an active military member or veteran, come spend your day with Twin Peaks Girls and enjoy a special discount on your order. All this with our friends over at Twin Peaks.
Yeah, for sure. I bet they did say that because I figured out they were sitting on it the way they were like weight shifting in the box, and you just kind of mix it up. That's why I like slide step fastball a couple times, and then just hang my leg and like wait a little bit and throw. But getting ahead with the heater and like that was surprising for sure.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on this Wednesday, reacting to South Carolina's victory in the first round of the SEC tournament, 10-5 over the Alabama Crimson Tide. And that guy right there, the voice you just heard, Chris Veach, was the reason why him talking about the success he was having with his changeup, and again, helped lead to his best outing of the entire season, and again, helped South Carolina end their losing streak. As he's been doing each and every day, we check in with our buddy Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central live in Hoover. And Jack, perhaps nobody more thrilled than you probably to finally be able to talk about a Gamecock win after the tumultuous past couple of weeks that you've had to endure in person for all those games.
Talk about a win, but yeah, I've been with this team day in and day out for the last forever now, honestly, this whole season, and especially the last 2 weeks being on the road too with Knoxville and all that. It's been crazy, and look, these guys deserve a win. It's been a long time coming. It's been over 2 weeks, going back to that. I think it was Winthrop and Rock Hill a few weeks ago. They picked up their last win. So for them to get this win number 14 in SEC play, I know we'll talk about it here, but I'll allude to it now. I mean, at this point, I think they're all but a lock for the postseason. Where they go from here is up to them. If they want to potentially get back into the hosting space, it's possible, but you got to win more games. And if you want to be a better seed, maybe a 2 seed in a region, you got to get probably another win or two. But I think right now they're in a good spot with where the metrics are.
Well, and I don't think that can be understated, the value of that 14th win, especially when you had 5 teams coming into the SEC tournament with identical records, Alabama being one of the other ones. And while we felt relatively okay about where South Carolina stood, you know, you look at the potential of a 7-game losing streak and, you know, putting your resume into the hands of a committee that may not look favorably upon your past couple of games, you've at least gotten that out of the way now, saying, okay, you got to win. You've at least locked yourself into the NCAA tournament. Whatever happens past this is gravy. Could they climb themselves in the projections a little bit more? Could they get a better seed? Absolutely. But if nothing else, if you lose today and you lose tomorrow and you're out of the tournament by Thursday, you've at least told yourself, okay, we know we're playing more baseball starting next week.
Yeah, no, I definitely have to agree. And right now, where the metrics sit, I mean, you're 19th in the RPI, you're number 7 in strength of schedule. You now have, I believe, 13 quad 1 wins with 3 quad 2 wins. You got 16 overall, and then obviously 14 SEC wins. I think that's good enough, man. I think that's very good right now. And look, I mean, if South Carolina were to go 0-2 these next 2 games, I mean, it's not the end of the world. I mean, you're facing Arkansas, and I think they do have a chance today because Hagen Smith's not pitching. So, I mean, if South Carolina pitches well enough and they hit like they did yesterday, I think you like their chances. But I think their RPI is going to continue to go up at this point. I mean, playing Arkansas is going to help with that. And then whoever you get in the next game, whether it's Kentucky or LSU, I think it'll go up from there. And you make the case for hosting if you get some more wins here.
Well, again, the story yesterday was certainly what Chris Veach was able to do on the mound. And we know, Coach Kingston said they were going to have kind of a similar approach yesterday as they did Saturday. We basically kind of gave everybody 2 innings one time through the order and kind of evaluated things from there. And I give props to Coach Kingston and Coach Williams because they just let Chris Veach continue to cook. Now, let a couple runners on there late in the game, and you kind of thought maybe he'd get pulled, but they let him stay in there, let him finish out the game, and he gave us a performance that. And look, Veach has pitched well, but he's not gone past 2 2/3 innings this entire season. Nobody expected him to go in there and take half the game and pitch as well as he did.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say something a lot of Gamecock fans will probably like to hear. I think that was a very Matt Price-esque performance. I think he did something like that in the College World Series one year, but that's just off a little research there. But anyway, I mean, that was a gem of a performance yesterday from Chris. I mean, 5 2/3 innings, no runs, 3 hits, 6 strikeouts, no walks, and I think you played the clip at the beginning of this segment from the audio yesterday. I mean, I asked, the Alabama players were talking about how they expected you to throw the changeup and they were sitting on it. And how are you able to make it work? Like, what is so filthy about that changeup? And he said he mixed up his pitches. I mean, he threw a slide step fastball, and he himself was surprised that he was able to get that heater over for a strike and get ahead early in the count, because Alabama, can hit the fastball, obviously. But, I mean, he made it work, and he fooled them. I mean, he got ahead in a lot of counts, retired 13 in a row at one point, and I mean, I think it's safe to say that he saved the season for South Carolina. I mean, I think it's tough to imagine they win this game the way they did if it weren't for him.
Well, I think there's the added bonus onto this. And look, I said going into the game yesterday that you had your back up against the wall. You throw out as many pitches as you need to, do whatever you can to win that game. But the fact that you only had to use 3 guys yesterday in Eskew, Becker, and then Veach, taking over more than half the game, that gives you a lot more options for today and tomorrow as well. For however these 2 games end up going, you obviously still have Gainey in your back pocket. I know he's still coming off of, resting from his start the other day. But according to Kingston, he's available if you need him, maybe in a closing situation. Once again, Eli Jones gets to start today, but you have a lot more options in your back pocket now that Veach was able to eat up so many innings yesterday.
Absolutely. I thought their pitching staff was in good shape in terms of rest heading into this tournament, but the fact that you were able to get as many innings as you did from Chris, and he pitched wonderfully yesterday, as we all know, but the fact that you only had to use 3 pitchers yesterday really helps you out. I mean, you could potentially use Matthew Becker or Dylan Eskew again if you need to this week, if you get that far. But I think with Eli today, the big thing is, okay, is he going to go 2 innings or is he going to go longer? I mean, when he pitched against Arkansas about a month ago, he went 4 innings, gave up 7 hits, 1 run. Looked pretty good, but couldn't provide length. If that's the case, who do you go with after? In my opinion, I would go Ty Good today after Eli. If you get 2-3 innings out of him, let Ty go 4 or 5 innings and then turn the game over to maybe like a Connor McCreary or something. I think you really are in a good position, and especially if you don't have to use Garrett Gainey today, I wouldn't use him. It's not an elimination game. Use him when you are on the verge of being eliminated. That's when it really matters, and let him go as long as he needs to, because you also get a week of rest after this week.
Again, talking to Jack Velcher from Gamecock Central live out in Hoover. Again, today, Arkansas, around 2 o'clock, depending on what time Kentucky and LSU wrap up game number 1. But you noted on something a moment ago that's really important to talk about here. You're missing Hagen Smith. You're not going to have to face him today. He's going to pitch at some point this week for Arkansas, but their head coach, Dave Van Horn, did mention it was probably not going to be today. You're going to have Ben Bybee on the mound to start the game, and he does have a little bit of a high ERA in SEC play, so hopefully South Carolina, we haven't even talked about the offense, who was on fire yesterday as well. Hopefully you have an opportunity to take advantage of a pitcher in Bybee today.
Yeah, I totally agree. And look, being at that Arkansas series about a month ago now, I mean, look, that was demoralizing facing Hagen Smith. I don't think I've ever really seen South Carolina have more issues than they did in that game. I mean, Hagen is just he's going to be one of the best pitchers in the draft this year, and he's phenomenal. But I think the big thing with today is obviously you're not facing him, and you shouldn't face him today. It'd be crazy for Arkansas to even think about pitching him today. There's no need to, because it's not an elimination game, like I said. But for South Carolina's offense, look, you scored 10 runs yesterday on 14 hits, 4 homers in that ballpark. I mean, think about it, in Knoxville, they only had 2 homers the entire weekend and scored 7 runs. So the fact that they were able to click like that at the right time, just when you needed to, gives me a little bit of hope that they can go out there and do it again. And if you do anything like that today, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to lose. I think anything close to what you got yesterday, especially with the middle of your order doing the damage they did. I think 2 through 5. They went 10 for 18 and with 4 RBIs. So, look, some guys are getting hot at the right time, and it's not just Cole Messina anymore. It's a lot of the big guys that you need to hit, and I think things are clicking at the right time for this team.
Well, regardless of what happens today, they will be playing at least one more game, tomorrow, whether that be in the elimination game early on or the winner's bracket tomorrow afternoon. So anything that they can do past this will be able to add to their resume and hopefully improve their standing for next week's NCAA tournament. And regardless of what happens today, we'll check in with you, Jack Velcher, once again tomorrow out there in Hoover. Appreciate it as always. Hopefully we can get another win today.
Yeah, hopefully that's the case. But I appreciate you having me on. I'll see you tomorrow.
Absolutely. Jack Feltry live from Hoover, representing Gamecock Central. We will come back. We'll shift gears over to football a little bit. An ongoing saga with Jaden Rashada now suing the Billy Napier and some folks down there in Gainesville. We'll talk about that with our buddy Dimitri Ravanos coming up next. It is the Extra Point. It's our head along with you on this Wednesday here on The Game. Tyler Head for Canty Foundation Specialist. I'm checking my weather app on my phone right now, and I'm happy to see that there is no rain in any of the forecast for the days to come. But inevitably, as we get into summer, you know those afternoon thunderstorms are going to be rolling in. Very heavy rain, heavy enough rain that might cause some issues with your crawl space. If you have a crawl space under your home and recently experienced a storm, you could have standing water there. High humidity and condensation in your crawl space can create an environment for mold, mildew, and pests, including things like termites. That moisture can also lead to wood rot and floor joist problems. Things like musty smells or awful odors can come from that mold and mildew that can cause breathing issues for you and your family. So if you have standing water under your home and your crawl space, you need to check out our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists. Go online to cantycanfixit.com and schedule an appointment today. Again, go online to cantycanfixit.com to schedule an appointment. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points Hour ahead along with you here on The Game. Obviously, plenty more baseball conversation to get into. We'll do that in hour number 2. Dimitri Ravenos joining me as he does each and every Wednesday. Dimitri, you are our resident Alabamian. Is that the right phrase? You at one point in your life lived in the state of Alabama. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to refer to you as.
I'm as close to a native, I think, as you can be without having been born there. I was born in Louisiana, but from the time I was 1 until I was 23, I lived in Alabama. So,
okay.
yeah, I call myself a native.
Any fond memories of the city of Hoover by chance?
Oh, sure. I lived in Hoover for about 3 years.
Okay.
Are you asking me specifically about the Hoover Met? No fond memories of that terrible place.
Not a fan.
No, it's a dump.
I believe didn't Hoover High School play their games at the Hoover Met when old Probst was coaching there?
They did. I think they might still, because the Hoover Met was such a big investment for what at the time was not a super populous Birmingham suburb, that they had to have more going on there than just minor league baseball to justify the cost. And now the Barons have moved downtown, so I would bet that they have the Met all to themselves at this point.
Yeah, I imagine so. I mean, outside of the SEC baseball tournament, I can't really think of anything else that would happen there. Could you imagine playing on the same field that Michael Jordan once got to play on? How cool would that be?
I did. I mean, I played baseball in high school, so I played tournaments there, and literally everywhere you go behind the scenes, like the tunnels behind the dugouts and stuff like that, everything is named the Michael Jordan blank, and it's like, man, he was here for 3 months.
Anything that he touched or came in contact with has the Michael Jordan seal of approval, I guess.
Yeah, him. And then when the Red Sox won the World Series in 2004, suddenly, as I understand it, everything that was named Michael Jordan, like at least half of it, got renamed after Terry Francona, who was the manager. I don't think he was Jordan's manager, but he was the manager of the Barons long before he became the manager of the Red Sox.
Yeah, I do remember that he was the manager for Jordan, because they had him in the Last Chance documentary, I think.
Oh,
talking
okay.
about Jordan's brief stint when it came to baseball,
Yes.
at least.
Yeah, although a lot of people in the city of Birmingham all have stories about how much Jordan sort of embraced being there. Like, he found a local barber, he found a local guy to come do his hot lather shaves, I guess I should say, and he found like a local shoe shine guy. I knew a ton of people when I was living in that area that had just a bunch of signed Jordan merchandise because they did something for him during that time.
Well, and knowing Michael, I'm sure he found a good place to gamble out there in Hoover as well.
They aren't hard to find.
That's true. Switching gears over to football now. We've been following this Rashada story for over a year and a half now, since it all kind of hit the fan, at the beginning of 2023. But it popped up again yesterday with this now lawsuit of Jaden Rashada suing not only Billy Napier, but several other people involved, the collectives that were responsible for trying to get him nearly $14 million with his initial NIL deal with Florida at the end of 2022. Obviously, we know what's happened since then. He's since gone to Arizona State, now transferred to the University of Georgia. And you brought up something in particular when we were talking about this yesterday, the kind of the line in the story that almost is getting overlooked to a degree, but Kirby Smart giving his blessing to Jaden Rashada to say, yes, please go sue our in-conference rival that we play every single year. Like, I don't think that was a hard ask to get Kirby Smart to sign off on that.
You're a Georgia fan. You would, and a Georgia alum, you would probably agree that to students and to the athletic departments, wins over Florida mean more than wins over Tech, right?
Oh, Florida's 100% the biggest rival.
Yeah. Okay. So here's what I was thinking, because I was watching the arguments back and forth on social yesterday of, is this Jaden Rashada, showing his true colors and being greedy, or is this the ultimate sign of just how out of control NIL is when these collectives can promise things they don't have to kids? And I wondered why we weren't talking more about Kirby Smart, because certainly, look, I think if you read the story, I think it's clear that Jaden Rashada has a very good case here, but
sure,
I think there is something else to this, which is Kirby Smart kind of wanting to put his foot on the neck of the conference and remind everybody, now that Nick Saban is gone, there is one Thanos in this universe, and you are looking at him, and I am going to determine your fate both on the field and off going forward.
Well, here's the thing. Is Kirby Smart afraid of Billy Napier and the Florida football program right now? No, he's not. He could care less what that team is doing. But if you have the opportunity to further hurt your rival and continue to set them back more and more, you're absolutely going to take advantage of that. So when your transfer, who, by the way, I mean, I was surprised as anybody when Rashada transferred to Georgia in an already very full quarterback room that Carson Beck's once again going to be starting in this season. So I was surprised in general that Rashada went there in the first place, but he goes there, now he drops this lawsuit on the table and says, hey, Kirby, I'm going to go sue Billy Napier, and they'll probably end up running him out of town because of this. You cool with that?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, Kirby Smart has a couple of institutional memories that I think motivate this a little bit. And again, I want to point out, I don't think this is just Kirby Smart saying, go do it. I think Jaden Rashada has a case that is going to win this lawsuit. But
sure.
I think there are two little bits of things that Kirby remembers. Number one, when he played at Georgia, he saw what Florida can get to when there is not enough standing in their way, right? Like during that time, his Bulldogs very rarely beat the HBC and the Florida Gators. So that is one. And two is, remember, Kirby was the defensive coordinator, or at least on the defensive staff from day one when Nick Saban arrived at Alabama. He could point to a long list of coaches that lost their jobs because of Nick Saban. Guys that were successful before Saban got there, like Phil Fulmer, Tommy Tuberville. The fact that it became very clear that these guys were forever going to be stuck behind Saban in Alabama is what ran them out of town. And I think that that is as much a testament to the power that Saban had in college football as anything else. And Kirby sees there's no reason he shouldn't be that guy now.
No, absolutely. And by the way, speaking of those memories of playing Florida back in the 90s, I believe he was on that team when Florida came into Sanford because they were making renovations down there in Gainesville and hung 50 on Georgia. So I'm sure that still hangs in his mind, too.
Isn't that the game that Spurrier referred to as half 100?
Yeah, that would be the one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is going to be very interesting going forward as college football, as the landscape changes, because I think we all know that we're in for some other big shift as it comes to the power conference teams. Can Kirby accomplish this sort of level of power? Can anyone again ever be the prism through which all of the college football light shines? He's got the best case because you look at what's going on in the upstate, like clearly Dabo is losing some sway in the sport, and maybe at Clemson. I'm not the one to be able to say that for sure. There is nobody else in the sport that has the resume that Kirby does right now.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And I think, he's going to be at Georgia for a very long time unless he just gets sick of the landscape of college football and decides to hang it up, early himself, because he's obviously made, more than enough money at this point in time. So it's up to him on how long he wants to coach. But I agree with you. I mean, I really think that, is he going to accomplish what Saban accomplished with all the national championships and all that kind of stuff? Probably not. Is he going to win a few more? Probably so. But he's definitely kind of positioned himself, and the money obviously backs that up as well, with kind of being the top dog in college football. And if there's an opportunity to continue to crush the competition around you on or off the field, he's not going to shy away from it.
No, and look, you talk about the money in college football. I think everybody in the fan world is looking at what is coming down the pipe with the House case and the settlements of how it is you are going to go about back pay to all of these athletes and what it means to paying athletes in the future. We as fans can catastrophize and imagine what that is going to be. I would bet someone like Kirby, who is really, really intelligent about the way this world works, recognizes that the Rashada case, more than anything, raises an issue of we have to come to some sort of model that works for the schools on paying these athletes, because if you let the collectives be in charge, if you let the boosters run the show, you're going to get more of these kind of cases. You're going to get more instances of adults promising dollar amounts they just do not have and have no path to getting to these kids and then bulking on these contracts, and then more coaches are going to be in Billy Napier's position.
And that is a really interesting thought, and we'll continue on with that, wrapping up hour number one. It is Dimitri Ravanos alongside me, Tyler Head. It is the Extra Point on your Wednesday morning here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on The Game. Dimitri Ravanos hanging out with me for a couple more minutes here. We'll get back into the baseball conversation. To start off hour number two, let's hear from Coach Kingston and what he had to say after yesterday's game as we get set for the Gamecocks and the Razorbacks later on this afternoon around 2 o'clock. Pregame coverage going to start once again like it did yesterday at 1:15 right here on The Game. But Dimitri, before we hit the break there, you brought up a really interesting point. you have to question what the ripple effect of this is going to be with the Rashada lawsuit now against Billy Napier. And that's the important thing to note here. It's not against the University of Florida. The University of Florida is not even named in this suit at all. It is against Billy Napier and these other guys that are involved with the collectives that were promising all of this money that they very well knew that they weren't going to be able to pay. And then they terminated his contract. They threatened to pull his scholarship if he didn't go ahead and commit it with him. And a lot of mess they've gotten themselves in. And you wonder what the ripple effect of this is going to be going forward with other coaches in this ever-changing landscape of NIL.
This is why it's so important that the Garnet Trust, unified the way it did a few, what was it, like 2 months ago, right?
Yeah, somewhere
that
around
Carolina's two collectives merged into one, is because you cannot have competing interests trying to please the overall, whatever you want to call it, the master, the big chief, whatever it is you want to say, because somebody's going to get sloppy. And that's absolutely what happened at Florida. There was no unified front. There was no operating procedure at Florida. And so things just got really messy. I've told you this a lot of times before, right? Like when Nick Saban talks about NIL being the reason that he retired, I'm sure dealing with the players is part of that. But I would bet not having full control over your roster because, by NCAA rules, the school and the coach are not supposed to be telling the collective how to spend their money. That means you've got to give up control of your roster to people that frankly don't know what they're doing. Like, I don't think we've seen the end of guys that were promised something, not getting it, becoming litigious, and I don't blame them for that. Like the NCAA created a Wild West scenario by not getting engaged in the NIL process, and these are the consequences of that.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's important what you noted there that you're putting the control in people that may not necessarily know what they're doing, and Billy Napier may have actually thought that this money was going to come about. He may have actually thought been presented some kind of information of how that $14 million was going to be scrounged up to pay Jaden Rashada, and he may have believed it, but then when it came to the time to actually pay the funds, things went sideways, and he had to come up with some other kind of story, and we're now in this mess. And maybe that's Billy Napier being naive, or maybe that's him, just trying to get some kind of advantage after a floundering first season down there in Florida. But regardless, he's in a mess, and now he's positioning himself. If Florida really wants to, they might be able to fire him with cause if this goes sideways.
I think they would. I mean, do I think they should? That's a tough question to answer because nobody got out a roadmap. Nobody even designed a roadmap for this kind of thing. That being said, like if you bought in without thinking critically about this, like, man, this is kind of on you if Billy Napier gets fired, right? The other thing I think that is important to point out that is like the reason that I think other coaches are going to be dealing with this in the future is you think about the way money used to get to players and recruits in the past. It was so under the table. And if it was found out, it could be a huge problem for your athletic department that kids could get screwed. And who were they going to go tell, right?
Sure,
because by telling anybody, there goes their ability to play anything in college. I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm not saying this is what happened in Florida. I don't know exactly what happened in Florida, but I would not be surprised if there are plenty of NIL collective members that used to be boosters that began this process operating that way.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's the important thing to note here. Jaden Rashada has a very good case here. Like, he was definitely wronged by Billy Napier and these folks, with the collectives down there in Florida for being promised that money, signing a contract, and then them saying, oh, by the way, we don't have the money that we promised you we're going to give you. So I'm very interested to see how this plays out in court and what that ultimately means, not only for Billy Napier, but for the Florida program as a whole, as well as, Jaden Rashada and what he gets out of this and how that benefits him going forward for whatever his future in college football is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, look, with the portal now, we see so many guys that transfer how many number of times. Who is the kid that came to Georgia from USC?
JT Daniels.
JT Daniels, yeah. I mean,
who finally ended his career last year.
Right, after going from USC to Georgia to West Virginia to Rice, right? Like, this is not going to be uncommon, but I do feel for Rashada and guys like him who NIL deals become a huge part of the news around the guy. Like, he may not win the starting job in Georgia. And given the short window you have to show NFL scouts what it is you can do, you can understand why he would want to transfer if that is the case. But he is going to forever be dogged by, you know, the label of diva or being difficult or just about the money, because of the way he was treated by Florida. I think it's unfair, but I don't see how he gets around it going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. We will see how all this plays out and what becomes of this lawsuit. Appreciate it as always, Dimitri, and we'll check in with you again next week.
You bet, buddy.
All right, that's Dimitri Ravenos joining me each and every Wednesday, as he always does here on The Extra Point. We'll jump back into the baseball conversation. Let's hear what Coach Kingston had to say after South Carolina's 10-5 victory over Alabama yesterday in round 1 of the SEC tournament, and get you set for game 2 coming up today against Arkansas. All right here on The Extra Point on the Game.
well. Backing up is Petrutz. That's gone. That's a good swing.
Yep.
That qualifies. Gamecocks, 2 home runs in the inning. Right back in this thing. It's 3-2.
Well, you talked about Alabama don't get the free bases, and so far they haven't given you much defensively, but nothing they can do about those.
Welcome back in hour number 2. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head here on the game. Derek Scott and Stuart Lake on the call yesterday for the Gamecocks' 10-5 victory over the Alabama Crimson Tide, round 1 of the SEC tournament. That was the Ethan Petrie home run in the 3rd inning, second of 3 home runs that would be hit in that inning en route to the Gamecocks' 5-run victory to advance into the 2nd round to take on Arkansas. And that's something, you know, we focus so much on the pitching these past couple weeks because it has been really bad. Even going back to the Missouri series that they won a few weeks back on the road out there in Como, the pitching, especially the starting pitching, was not good. Thankfully, you had an offense at that point in time that was able to do enough to get you over the hump. Still take 2 out of 3 against Missouri on the road, but it was a different story yesterday. And again, Chris Veach, the story of the day, going out there doing the work that he did, going 5 2/3 innings and, locking things down for the second half of that game. But the offense looked very crisp, very efficient, obviously hitting home runs, 4 of them over the course of the game, which is something you did not do in weirdly enough, a smaller ballpark at Lindsey Nelson Stadium last weekend against Tennessee up there in Knoxville. So hitting home runs in one of the more challenging ballparks to do that in is definitely a good sign for this offense that, again, like pitching, kind of needed another spark, needed to get itself back on track with a good performance, and that's exactly what they were able to do yesterday. And again, I played that Petrie home run here just a second ago. Solid day for him, 3 for 5, including that home run. Cole Messina 3 for 4 with 1 home run, 3 RBIs. Had a base knocked in a couple runners late in the game as well. And then Gavin Casas with the another home run, went 2 for 3 on the day. And then, of course, Dalton Reeves with the grand slam, his lone hit of the day, did bring in all 4 of those RBIs, all that accounting for the 10 runs that South Carolina had. And I've talked about this so many times this season where South Carolina, and it doesn't really come as a surprise, really lives and dies on the combination of Ethan Petrie and Cole Messina and what they're able to do at the plate. If those 2 guys have a good combined weekend, South Carolina is usually going to win the series. If those 2 guys have a bad combined weekend, South Carolina going to usually end up losing the series. And I know this is a little bit different because it's a 1-game sample size, but when you look at those 2 guys, and I'll even loop in Blake Jackson as well, who hits in that 3-hole right between them. Between those 3 guys, they went a combined 9 of 14 with 4 RBIs. 5 RBIs between them. I mean, that is the maximum amount of efficiency that you can hope for the 2 through 4 in your lineup. Brinkley didn't have the best day. He ended up going 4 for 3 on the day. But again, when the meat of your lineup is hitting like that, you're usually going to have a lot of success on offense. So again, just good to see South Carolina kind of get things back on track from an offensive standpoint and pitching standpoint, which was both very much needed after how the past couple of weeks had gone for the Gamecocks. And again, you can't overlook the point of how big this is for South Carolina and their aspirations when it comes to the postseason. In fact, Coach Kingston, who's had to answer this question a lot of times over the past couple of weeks, talked about what this means for South Carolina going forward past the SEC tournament. Cut number 7 here, Dave.
I think it means I'll stop having to read every article that Mark Etheridge puts out there and figuring out every last data point and comparing won-loss records at RPIs and strength of schedules. I think this obviously, I thought we were solidly in before. I think this just makes it a slam dunk now. Now I think the focus changes to what happens if we go on a run. Can we get in that top 12 RPI now, which it could be conceivable playing the teams we're going to play. So it's amazing what a fine line it can be in this league. What it does to our psyche, I'm glad that our guys got rewarded for enduring a couple of the hardships that we've had over the last couple weeks, because it feels good to win, man. It really does. It's hard to win in this league, really hard, and so I'm just glad the guys got to experience that. The number one motivation for them was that they didn't want to have another 7-hour bus ride like we had yesterday to get here. They didn't want to have to get back on that thing and head back to Columbia today. Now they know they're going to be here for a little while, and I'm just really happy that they're going to experience everything this tournament is.
Absolutely. And, when you look at the metrics, which is something that we go back to. And we talked about it going into the tournament. Like, we felt like South Carolina was probably okay, but I wasn't going to sit here and bet, a large sum of money on it by any means. That South Carolina was going to, be able to, safely say that they were in the NCAA tournament, and that has changed because now you have this win. Now I think that locks you in, and you have the opportunity to improve on your seeding from here on out, because you are top 20 in the RPI. In fact, you moved up one spot because Alabama was one spot ahead of South Carolina. They essentially flip-flop positions with South Carolina beating beating Alabama yesterday. And in fact now, and this is dependent on other teams moving around, where Vanderbilt actually jumped in to the top 25 themselves, or excuse me, the top 25 in the RPI themselves yesterday with their win in round 1 of the SEC tournament, to where now South Carolina's record against quad 1 opponents, which going into yesterday, they were 9 of 18. They've now actually improved to 13 of 18. So you actually tack on 3 additional wins, as well as the Alabama win yesterday, with Vanderbilt moving up, which again improves South Carolina's resume. Regardless of whether they win or lose against Arkansas today, that is a team that is second in the RPI, so that will further improve South Carolina's resume, especially if they're able to win today just by playing Arkansas again. Then who knows what happens if you play an elimination game tomorrow or you play in the winner's bracket tomorrow. So again, South Carolina can continue to improve on their seeding from here on out, but just being able to safely say that you're guaranteed to be in the tournament at this point in time is a good feeling, and hopefully they're going to play a little bit looser. Because that is an interesting thing to note that we've talked about a lot these past couple weeks is the psyche, the mental side of what's been going on with the South Carolina baseball team, because losing's hard. I mean, there's no two ways about that. I've played on some really good baseball teams. I've played on some really bad baseball teams in my life. And when you're playing on the good team that's winning a lot of games and in contention for a league championship or a conference championship or something like that, you just have a swagger about you. You have a good feeling about you that just kind of makes everything come a little more naturally, to where you're playing a little bit more carefree, playing a little bit more naturally, as opposed to if you're constantly worrying about, man, well, how are we going to fix this? How are we going to fix that? How are we going to finally win? How are we going to get ourselves back on track, or whatever it may be? That goes a long way, especially in a game like baseball. Let's hear cut number 6 here, Dave. This is Coach Kingston talking about the team putting the past 2 weeks behind them.
Yeah. Part of my speech to the team this morning was I keep getting asked that question. How are they going to recover from a tough couple weeks? And with all due respect, I told our team, people that are asking us those questions don't really know what you guys are made of, don't know what's going on inside this building, don't know the investment you have all made to support each other for the last 10 months, starting on the first day of class. And so we are very intentional about trying to build a group of guys that know there are going to be ups and downs in this league. Very few teams will ever go through this league unscathed. You're going to have ups and downs. Sometimes if the schedule falls a certain way, they're going to be early. Sometimes if the schedule falls a certain way, they're going to be late. But they're coming. And so you have to build the right foundation that they'll be able to handle it when they do come. Baseball is a game that demands consistency and a certain calm and a stable mindset. And so we've always emphasized that to our guys, that that's where we have to be. And I think that allows you to deal with the downs until the wave comes back to you and you start to experience some of the ups.
Now, Coach Kingston's saying the right things there. He's saying, I wasn't concerned about this team's psyche or anything like that. And that's what, as a coach, you're supposed to say. You're not going to go out there and say, well, my team's pretty weak mentally and we don't know how to handle, losing a bunch of games in a row. I get that from a coaching standpoint, but at the same time, it's impossible to ignore the noise. In today's day and age, with all the information we have, accessible to us, on our phones and through text messaging and stuff like that, it's impossible to ignore what's being said about you. And these players, they hear it, whether they want to or not. And again, you don't have to go on Twitter yourself. You don't have to check message boards yourself. People are going to tell you things. People will say, hey, guess what so-and-so was saying about you? Guess what these people were saying about your team, your coach? Well, whatever you guys have been doing as of late, it's impossible to ignore that noise. And I know they've been hearing it especially worse these past couple weeks, because the fan base as a whole has been very frustrated, and justifiably so, because this team was not playing up to the standard that they are expected to play to, not just this season, but every single season. And that's why so many people are so critical of Mark Kingston. That's why so many people, we get text every single day on here, hey, fire Mark, we need to find a new head coach. Because people have a certain level of expectation and a standard for this program that up to this point, they feel like Coach Kingston has not lived up to. And things were looking pretty bleak when you go out there and lose in the fashion that you did against Georgia and Tennessee the past 2 weekends, limping in to a place in Hoover that historically has not been good to South Carolina, especially in the Kingston era. I can understand why people were very critical. I can understand why people are jumping on the bandwagon of, hey, we need to find a new head coach, we need to fire Kingston, all that kind of stuff. Not saying that that's what was going to happen, but I get why people feel that way. And again, all this trickles down. The players hear that, the coaches hear it, all this kind of stuff. They understand the frustration. They know people are upset. And that, you kind of have two options with that. You can go out there and let it affect you and lose more and make yourself look worse, or you can use that as your fuel, your motivation, if anything else, to go out there and prove those people wrong. And that's the thing that we all have to remember, and especially for people like us that get to do this for a living, talking about this team each and every day. When we're talking negatively about the team, we're justified in doing so because they're not looking good. The numbers are not backing up what they need to be doing. And if that proves to be a motivating factor, if they want to use that as fuel to go out there and prove us wrong, by all means do it. Please prove me wrong. I'm perfectly okay with that. If I can be your motivating factor, if I can light a fire underneath you as a team, I'm good with that. I don't know if a lot of the fans are the same way, because I think some people just want to see a change for the sake of seeing change, hoping that somebody else can come in here and run the show a little bit better. But if they can look at that and say, hey, everybody's doubting us. Nobody's giving us a chance. They want our coach gone. They don't think that we can do this. They don't think we can do that. If you can use that as your motivating factor to go out there and play better baseball, absolutely, by all means, do it. Now, again, are we wrong for saying that the pitching has suffered? Are we wrong for saying the offense could be better? We are absolutely not, because the numbers back it up. What we see with our eye on a week-in, week-out basis does not support the claim that this team is in a great spot right now, that everything's fine, and there's no need to pay attention to the man behind the curtain type of thing. You know what I mean? Like, there's still issues with this team. This team needs to improve in areas. But at least for yesterday, we can smile saying, hey, they finally won. Hey, they advanced to the second round of Hoover. They at least get themselves 2 more games. Like the small victory, right? But it means something. And hopefully this is the catalyst. Hopefully this is the spark that this team needs to put together a good run through the month of May as we wrap it up, obviously, but into June with the NCAA tournament. And advancing out of whatever region you get to go to, because you're not going to get to host at this point in time outside of running the table through the SEC tournament and winning the whole thing, which I don't think is going to happen. South Carolina's going to be going on the road at the end of next week somewhere. Maybe it's Clemson in the upstate. Maybe it's short drive. But regardless, South Carolina's going to go on the road and have to put together a good performance in somebody else's ballpark to get themselves to a super. And what happens past that, we'll see. I still don't have the utmost belief in this team being able to make a deep run in the tournament. But hey, again, prove me wrong. Go out there and prove me wrong, and I'll be perfectly okay with that. And that'll keep us engaged farther into the summer, which is cool with me. So again, if nothing else, good win yesterday. Got yourself back on track to a degree, and now set your sights on another team that you're familiar with in the University of Arkansas. So we'll discuss them, dive into that matchup that you have coming up later today next. Again, first pitch coming up around 2 o'clock. Premium coverage starting at 1:15, all right here on the Game. I want to remind you once again, the craft beer card is back. Go online to 1075thegame.com. Click on the Sweet Deals tab. Purchase yourself a craft beer card for $79. It's $30 you spend at a brewery at 12 different craft beer locations. A $360 value, all yours for just $79. So again, go online to 1075thegame.com. Click on Sweet Deals and purchase yourself a craft beer card. Previewing Arkansas. We'll hear from their head coach as well. Coming up next, it is the Extra Point here on the Game. Welcome back in. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you here on this Wednesday morning. Getting set here in just a couple of minutes for day number 2 of the SEC tournament. LSU and Arkansas getting things rolling out there in Hoover. First pitch coming up at 10:30, and then depending on how long it takes, South Carolina and Arkansas will follow that sometime around 2 o'clock. Pregame coverage, regardless of what time first pitch is, will start here on the game at 1:15, just like it did yesterday with Stewart and Derek on the call coming up in just a little bit. Recapping yesterday out there, you had Vanderbilt take care of Florida, and Florida put on a couple of runs in the top of the ninth there to make that score look closer than it was. But Vanderbilt dominated that game. LSU dominated Georgia in the early game yesterday, and of course South Carolina took care of Alabama. The real exciting game of the day actually ended up being the egg bowl on the diamond between Mississippi State and Ole Miss. The nightcap game last night that ended up being very, very fun, and I can't think of anything more thrilling than not only hitting a walk-off home run, but hitting a walk-off home run against your rival in a elimination tournament game, because that's exactly what happened with Mississippi State last night. 2-run homer for Husak in the bottom of the ninth inning to propel the Bulldogs over in-state rival Ole Miss 2-1, and they had a even record against each other at 4-4 on the season going into last night's game. So that was cool to see. For a game that we don't really have any stake in here at South Carolina, just see a good, entertaining baseball game that ended up with that walk-off hit there at the end of day number 1. Now we turn our attention to the Arkansas Razorbacks, who come in as one of the best teams in the country, a team that South Carolina saw only a couple weeks ago. And here is Coach Dave Van Horn yesterday talking about taking on the Gamecocks again.
Yeah, just, we won a couple of games there, some tight games. We only know what we know. I guess they're solid. They maybe struggled a little bit the last couple of weeks, but they're very talented. They have some really good arms. It's hard to say who they would throw against us, but at this time of the year, you just kind of play and go from there.
So again, this is a team that, just like Alabama yesterday, South Carolina had seen them earlier on in the season, and just like Alabama, South Carolina dropped 2 out of 3 against them in that series, and that they were the middle part of that great run that Carolina went on roughly through the month of April, where you beat Kentucky, you beat Florida, and you beat Missouri. Arkansas was kind of squeezed in the middle of that, where South Carolina was only able to get one of those series victories. And this Arkansas team as a whole has actually dropped 2 out of their last 3 series against Kentucky and A&M, and in both those series, they gave up double-digit runs for the first time all season. So pitching stifling a little bit here as of late for Arkansas. Big question, of course, anytime you take on the Razorbacks this season is, are you going to have to face Hagen Smith? And for the Gamecocks, thankfully, that is not going to be the case. Hagen Smith did pitch this past weekend against Texas A&M and is still resting, still recovering, so he's not going to be going today. And if you remember back to that Friday night game that they played against Arkansas, he looked good as advertised, went 6 innings, only giving up 2 hits, 1 run, with 5 walks and 11 strikeouts. And Arkansas as a whole, that staff only surrendered 4 hits that entire night. Instead, you'll get a Ben Bybee, who did not see any action against South Carolina earlier on this season, primarily been a midweek guy, and has done some bullpen work in their games against SEC opponents. Brings in a 6.0 ERA, has 31 strikeouts and 26 hits in 24 innings pitched. Dave Van Horn did say it was probably going to be one of those opening type situations where he goes anywhere between 2 and 3 innings, and then they start moving in to the bullpen. Now, this bullpen, again, they have been stifling a little bit as of late. They do have the lowest batting average in all the SEC and also the most strikeouts in SEC play so far this season. So it's going to be another one of those games. And Carolina's been good at it. We know how well they are at drawing walks. I think they're going to have to just have a really disciplined plate approach at the end of the day and, be careful at be careful at what they're swinging at and hopefully have another very efficient day on offense. So you're going to miss Hagen Smith. You're probably going to see Brady Tigert. He did sit this past weekend against A&M, just trying to get a little bit more rest. Now, he did pitch against South Carolina earlier on this season and had a very efficient outing in that game, went 6 innings, only giving up 4 hits and 2 earned runs with 6 strikeouts in that game. His starts since then have been a little bit on the rougher side. Gave up 6 hits and 5 runs to Kentucky a couple weeks ago. Gave up 3 hits and 4 runs in less than 2 innings of work against Mississippi State the last time he took the mound. So it sounds like that sitting out the A&M series is more to kind of get his head right a little bit here. So he's somebody that you are maybe going to have to deal with today coming out of the bullpen after Ben Bybee does his job as the opener. Their offense, and we talked about this when they came to town or when they took on South Carolina a couple weeks ago, offense is not going to dominate you. They're not a team that hits a ton of home runs. Their RBIs aren't off the charts or anything like that. They're efficient. They're good. But this team definitely hangs its hat a little bit more on the pitching. Speaking of pitching, South Carolina going to roll out with Eli Jones once again today. He, of course, has been the consistent weekend starter for the Gamecocks this entire season, with the lone exception being this past weekend against Tennessee, where he did end up coming in the bullpen in game number 3, I guess it was. But getting back in the starting lineup, he did pitch against Arkansas earlier on in the year. Went 4 innings, only giving up 7 hits with 1 run. To one of his better performances of the entire season, which, again, we talk about this with Eli Jones. You know he's going to give up some hits, but it's about mitigating that damage on the base path when those guys do get on, that he has done a pretty good job of before these past couple weeks. Kind of started to trend the other way. As we talked about with Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central, you're probably going to go with somebody like Ty Good in that second spot. And look, he's kind of thrived in being that first guy in the bullpen, as we've seen him do so many times, coming in after Roman Kimball this season, that hopefully that's a position that he can thrive in, because he too did have a very rough outing at your regular season finale up there in Tennessee. And it begs the question of, okay, what do you do with Garrett Gainey? Do you bring him in a closing role today, if possible? Do you save him for tomorrow to start, knowing that you are going to have to play a game? I still think, and even though the South Carolina is not in a back up against the wall scenario today like they were yesterday, I still think you have to go out there and just go with whatever your best option is at that point in time. I don't think you can sit there and say, no, we're trying to save Gainey for tomorrow's start. Save tomorrow for tomorrow. If you have the opportunity with a 1 or 2 run lead going into the 8th inning, you can bring in Garrett Gainey to close the game down. Do it. Do whatever you can. Don't over strategize this. Don't think too far ahead. Focus on the task at hand, and again, just make sure you're using your allotment of pitchers for today's game. If you have the opportunity to win, of course. So we'll see what happens. Again, first pitch coming up around 2:00. Pregame coverage starting at 1:15 right here on the Game. We'll switch gears over to football once again. Coach Beamer talking at another welcome home event. I believe this is the last one of the month of May, out there in Myrtle Beach last night. We'll hear what he had to say and continue to evaluate this team as we go through this post-spring practice time, kind of hoping and wondering what 2024 is going to look like on the football field. That's all coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday, getting you set for more SEC tournament action with the Gamecocks and the Razorbacks coming up later today, all right here on the Game.
Yeah, Lenore's has been great. He's just the definition of just steady and consistent. He's a guy that just works really, really hard and very humble, has great humility about himself, but has a competitive streak. Strong work ethic, and has just done nothing but get better in the weight room, academically, on the football field, in the meeting room, learning what we do offensively, and excited for him. It's a great quality to have in a quarterback, just that steadiness where you're not up and down and emotional and riding the waves and the highs and the lows, and he's not like that at all. He's a winner. He won a state championship in high school, obviously, and knows what it takes. So I'm excited about him and his future here at Carolina.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point Towerhead with you here on this Wednesday. That was Coach Beamer last night at the Myrtle Beach Welcome Home event, as he gets asked each and every time to give a little bit of thought on Lenore Sellers now that he has officially been named the starter coming away from spring practice a couple weeks ago. Funny enough, at another Welcome Home event is where that happened. But talking there about, Sellers being steady and consistent, which is what we gathered from everything that we saw and heard coming away from spring practice. And he's easily been the biggest story of this team through spring, as it often happens when you're making a transition from one quarterback era to another, with Rattler going on to the NFL and now Sellers coming in, being what we assumed to be the starter even before the season started, but now just a little bit more, confirmed at this point in time. Still an open competition, still a chance for somebody to jump up and take the job, if they turn out to be better, but we don't expect that to be the case. I was looking yesterday on ESPN, Bill Connolly, who puts out his S&P Plus rankings every single year, multiple times a year, by the way, because the rankings change as the year and the season goes along. And this is a ranking that is heavily based on metrics when it comes to college football. Now, it takes into account returning production, recent recruiting, recent history with teams to kind of spit out these numbers to give an overall ranking of where a team is compared to everybody else in college football. And based on Bill Connolly's post-spring practice S&P ranking, South Carolina 43rd overall in the country. They're 64th in returning offensive, or 64th in offensive efficiency, 37th in defensive efficiency, and 12th overall in special teams efficiency. So good, solid numbers, and not bad to be in the upper third of all teams in college football. But much like recruiting, being in the top 20 is great, but then you realize, we're actually low on the totem pole in the SEC because they rank 13th out of the now 16 teams in the SEC, with only Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt being behind them according to this metric. And again, this is just a metric that's based on numbers, right? Based on statistics and averages and all those kind of things. So it doesn't tell you everything, but it does echo a lot of questions that we have about this team. Coach Beamer and staff have done a fantastic job in the transfer portal of going out and grabbing a lot of talent, a lot of different areas of need, in particular areas that we were worried about coming away from last season that, aren't going to be quelled necessarily until we actually see the play on the field speak for itself. But where we sit at this point in time, I think we can safely say we feel good for the most part about most of these positions that South Carolina did have to go out and find some guys in the transfer portal about. One position in particular being wide receiver, where you bring in Huggins Bruce, you bring in Larvadain, you bring in now Devon Campbell, Jared Brown, Jacobs from Florida State. Like, you've brought in a ton of talent in addition to the guys that you have returning in Nicholas Harbor, Tyshawn Russell, bringing a couple of highly touted freshmen in Mazio Bennett, DeBron Gatling. You have a very full wide receiver room, and how it's going to shake out, we don't know. I can't sit here and definitively tell you who the wide receiver one is going to be next season, who's going to be the leading receiver, who's going to have the most touchdowns or anything like that. I have an idea. It seems like Larvadain's kind of taken, the reins a little quicker than everybody else and kind of has emerged as maybe the leader at this point in time. But as we know, spring practice doesn't tell you the whole story. There have been plenty of guys through spring practice that have garnered all the headlines and grabbed all the attention that we don't end up talking about at all when the season does actually roll around. But it's one of those situations where you look at the amount of talent, the amount of experience you brought into that room, whoever ends up being, your 4, 5, 6 guys that are consistently playing at the wide receiver spot, it's probably going to be a good collection of guys, just given the fact that you have so much talent that is in that room. Same kind of thing, hopefully, again, knock on wood, when you're dealing with the offensive line, that, yes, you had the injury issues a season ago. You're returning a lot of guys from the offensive line, but you've also brought in just a lot of different bodies, a lot of different, skill sets, a lot of versatile guys in your offensive line room that if everybody can stay healthy, knock on wood, whatever that starting 5 ends up being, and we have kind of an idea of what the starting 5 is going to end up being, but regardless of what ends up happening, you assume, or at least you hope, that given the amount of talent, given the amount of guys that you have in that room, whoever that starting 5 is going to be pretty darn good, because those guys had to earn their way to that spot, given the fact they had so many other guys to beat out. Is that a perfect science? It's not, but something that you can at least be hopeful for with not only the offensive line, but several other positions on this team as we get closer and closer to the season starting. And again, once we actually start playing, once toe meets leather against Old Dominion on August 31st, our perception of all this is going to change, hopefully for the positive. But until then, we are left to merely speculate about what this team's going to look like in 2024. We'll talk some racing, as we do each and every week, coming up next with Jen Jensen, as some interesting things happened at North Wilkesboro, including some haymakers being thrown, some fights taking place in the pits after the race. We'll dive into that. I'll let you hear from some important players in that coming away from it. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday morning on The Game.
I feel like Colin and I have always raced each other really hard. Back to the Nationwide Series when we were competing for wins week in and week out, and never had any issues. And then, I wrecked him one time at Daytona, and he's been kind of bad-mouthed me ever since then. So I feel like we get along with each other okay outside the racetrack. I talked to him quite a bit, and I'm not sure why he was so mad that I shoved it 3 wide, but. He hit the fence and kind of came off the wall and ran into me. And I don't know, when I was talking to him, he kept saying that I wrecked him.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you, ready to talk some racing with Jen Jensen, as we do each and every week. Now, Jen, we usually focus on what happens on the racetrack, but the headlines this week focusing on what happened kind of on the racetrack, but more after the race with Kyle Busch and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. throwing hands at the All-Star race, and that was Ricky Stenhouse, kind of pleading his case on what happened there as things got physical in the hauler lot after the checkered flag on Sunday.
Man, even Dad got involved, right? How crazy! And the penalties, not good. So, do you think Stenhouse Jr.'s dad, Stenhouse Sr., do you think he's going to get to come back into the infield at all, or is he going to be able to be in the pits for a while?
So, for those that aren't familiar, Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s dad, who was involved with the fight, actually got kind of cold-cocked by Kyle Busch at one point in time. Did get indefinitely suspended by NASCAR, had his hard card revoked, so he won't be in the garage area for the foreseeable future. This isn't the first time this has happened. Joey Logano's dad got penalized with this. I think the Busch's dad has gotten penalized with this before. They will eventually be allowed to come back in. It's just going to be a little bit of a holding period more than anything else. I think it's more of a warning type of thing. Yeah, just kind of to discourage this kind of behavior from happening. But
because family members are not supposed to get involved. Basically, I think the gist of it.
They're not, and quite frankly, I don't agree with Stenhouse getting fined $75,000 because NASCAR is going to use this in every single promotion going forward for not only this weekend in the Coke 600, but next year's All-Star race. It does good. It promotes the sport. They're talking about NASCAR on the Pat McAfee show on Monday, which never happens before. You know what I mean? So it's obviously something that helps boost the sport. And I understand not wanting to let things get out of hand, but I think $75,000 for this penalty is a little much.
No, like you said, the marketing money that they're going to save out of this, because what great content they're going to have to promote the Coca-Cola 600 of all things. How huge.
And let's kind of go back to the matter at hand here, why this happened. So on lap basically number 1, 3-rod situation happens. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in the middle, Kyle Busch on the outside, gets shoved up into the wall. Now whether you blame Ricky Stenhouse Jr. For that or not is up for debate, certainly. He didn't look especially egregious. Kyle Busch took exception to it, basically turned Ricky Stenhouse Jr. the following lap and ended his night. Kyle Busch, these past couple of years, as he's, gotten older, he obviously has a family now, a couple kids, he's, changed his team and all that kind of stuff. He's mellowed out quite a bit from the Kyle Busch that we saw 10, 12 years ago.
Definitely.
The Kyle Busch we saw on Sunday night between wrecking Stenhouse Jr. and between the fight after the race, I feel like we're getting bad boy Kyle Busch back, which from an entertainment perspective is great for the sport.
You can't disagree with that at all. He is definitely Rowdy is back. And the bad boy, again, that's what sells tickets. People love to have some kind of have a couple bad boys, have some rivalries going on. And, yeah, he has been a little bit more tame, and I think I've almost liked him a little bit better because he's tame. But I don't know. I kind of like to see the old Kyle Busch coming back and whatever, and where he just kind of didn't care. And again, it was funny, the Dale Jr. comment about, hey, cement up those tunnels, because it was so great that because of the configuration of the track, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. could not leave the track until after the race. So here he is in his cute little shorts and boat shoes or something and coming and attacking Busch. I would have thought that Stenhouse probably could have settled himself down, but I think it just made it worse for him to sit in there waiting until the end of the race.
Well, and this is certainly not over. And last night at the NASCAR Hall of Fame, where they announced the class of 2025, Richard Childress was asked to weigh in on, who, of course, is the car owner for Kyle Busch, to give his thoughts on what happened. And he did not disappoint with his comments. Hit it, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I would have jumped right in the middle of it.
And then what?
Well, I was started fighting. I don't fight as fair as I used to. I'm a little older. But Ricky Stenhouse said that he was going to wreck the 8 car at Charlotte. Well, when I see him, I'm going to tell him, if he does, I'm older, but I've just changed my style of fight. He'll carry a rough ass beating.
Richard Childress is 78 years old. He is not afraid to get physical, though.
Hey, in defense of his car, no, he will. He'll fight for it. But so it's going to be interesting. How clean is Stenhouse going to race Kyle Busch in that? You know, is he willing to face a Richard Childress beatdown, or, you know, I don't know.
Well,
it's going to be a fun race.
I would, given what happened in last year's Coke 600 between Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin, I would not recommend getting your payback at a 1.5-mile track, because that could lead to some larger fines and suspensions going forward. I would maybe wait until, I don't know, Iowa or Loudon in a couple weeks, where you're not at risk of getting in as much trouble.
I would 100% agree with that. And again, it's too obvious if you do it this week.
Oh, totally.
Try to make it where it's totally a little less obvious, and maybe NASCAR is not going to be as willing to penalize.
And there's so much happening this weekend. We don't have time to get into all of it, but it is the best weekend of the year when it comes to racing. On Sunday, you're going to have the Monaco Grand Prix, you're going to have the Indy 500, you're going to have the Coke 600 wrapping things up on Sunday night just up the road at Charlotte Motor Speedway. You're going to be fortunate enough to be in attendance for the Indy 500. Once again, fingers crossed the weather holds off, because it's not looking great as of right now.
Yeah, it's looking a little bit better. It looks like maybe some afternoon showers, so maybe a shower will go through, and then, you know, that track dries fairly well. So fingers crossed.
And I'm especially jealous of you, because you're going to get the opportunity to witness at least the first leg of Kyle Larson running the Indy Coke 600 double, something that hasn't been done in 10 years since Kurt Busch did it back in 2014. And Kyle Larson, we know
qualifying effort.
How exceptional of a talent he is, no matter what kind of car he gets in. To go out there, having never run an IndyCar race before, to qualify 5th overall. Like, I'm not expecting him to go out there and win the race on Sunday, but if you told me right now that Kyle Larson was going to walk away with the top 5 in the Indy 500, I would 100% believe you. Like, this is just only adding to the legacy of what is legitimately one of the best drivers in the world right now.
Yeah, he can wheel anything, and to be able to get in the second row, I mean, that's incredible against all the talent that is out there. I hate the fact that Penske is sitting, 3 wide on the front row. That's a whole other story, but he is wheeling that thing like he's been doing it forever.
Yeah, and he's so low-key about everything. I mean, he went out there and ran 241 miles an hour going into turn 1 on Sunday, and it's like, yeah, that was cool. Like, that's literally the fastest he's gone in his entire life. And not only that, he flies to North Wilkesboro, runs the All-Star race, finishes top 5 there. Like, there's really nothing this guy can't do. And again, I've been a Larson fan for a very long time, so I've been very high on him for a while. But I'm so excited, and hopefully, again, the weather holds off where we can get to see this thing come to fruition, just to see him take on this remarkable feat of running the double this weekend.
Yep, it's a huge, huge feat, and I'm truly excited. I think he's going to do exceptionally well. I think he's learned the car. There's going to be a lot to learn. There's a lot of intricacies with running an Indy car, but I would think when you get back to Charlotte and get back in the NASCAR, it's like, oh, well, this thing's kind of putzing along.
No, for sure.
You know, huge speed differences.
And here's the thing. He's going to be a favorite to win the Coke 600 on Sunday night. Like I said, if he can walk away with a top 5 or even a top 10 in the Indy 500, I'll be more than satisfied, because you're going to have a very tough time beating those Penske Chevrolets, which, by the way, ended up sweeping the front row for the Indy 500 once again, as Joseph Newgarden looks to defend his Indy 500 title from a season ago. Regardless, I think we're in for a great race on Sunday at both tracks between Indy and Charlotte. And for folks like us that just enjoy motorsports, this is truly the best weekend of the year.
It's like Christmas for me, absolutely, and you as well. Yep, let's just hope the weather holds in both cities.
Fingers crossed. We'll have plenty to talk about coming up next Wednesday as we recap everything that happens on Motorsports Christmas coming up on Sunday between Monaco, Indy, and then the Coke 600. So enjoy it, your time out there at Indy, and we'll check back in with you again next week.
I love it. Thanks so much, Tyler.
All right, Jen Jensen heading out to the Indy 500 coming up this weekend. That'll do it for today's edition of the Extra Point. Coming up next, it is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Back into the baseball conversation, getting set for the Gamecocks and the Razorbacks coming up later on this afternoon at the SEC Tournament. All right, here on the Game.